Hi, so this is Mike, SBR Sport. I want to spend a little bit of time today discussing the difference between trigger points, acupuncture and acupressure. Seems to be a little bit of confusion between the two, and so we want to spend just a few minutes clearing that up. First of all, what is a trigger point? Well, a trigger point is an area in the muscle that has gone into a tight knot. And you can kind of feel it, I'm sure at some stage of your life you've pulled a muscle in your neck, and as you've tried to massage that muscle out, you've got over an area of the neck where you feel something that is almost the size of a pea. It could potentially be the size of a small marble. I've come across trigger points that are almost the size of a cross-section of a squash ball. And it's that area of the muscle, this taut coming together of the muscle, that is what a trigger point is all about. What happens in that area of the trigger point is that you get a reduced blood flow. In other words, in that area it's very difficult for blood to go through because the muscle is in that point of constant contraction. Also, because the trigger point is slightly bigger than the muscle fibers around it, the trigger point tends to block off blood supply or reduce blood supply in the muscles around the trigger point, and so you get a buildup of lactic acid in that area. You also get lots and lots of pain and discomfort in that area. What is acupuncture? Well, acupuncture was designed by sort of Chinese ancient doctors, and what Chinese medicine believes is that your body is made up of certain lines of energy. These are electromagnetic lines of energy that form in pathways that are called meridians. And so what the acupuncturists developed was a system whereby they mapped out certain meridian lines. And so you would have what would be called the stomach line, or the spleen line, or the digestion line. And basically what would happen is you would go to an acupuncturist and describe your symptoms, and the acupuncturist would use certain systems to try and diagnose what was wrong with you, and off of that the acupuncturist would try and put acupuncture needles in along those lines in order to rectify the energy patterns and bring relief. Acupressure has got a similar type understanding, except in acupressure what you get is the acupressurist tries to put pressure on those various meridian lines instead of actually putting a needle in. What is interesting is that there does seem to be an overlay between acupuncture and trigger point therapy. Trigger points very, very often follow in certain patterns. The patterns very, very often follow according to lines of fascia. Now you've got a fascial coating over every muscle in your body. Your fascia holds all of your organs together. The fascia is really the network that holds everything together. And what has been found is that your body has certain areas where it has got definite fascial lines. So there is a line called the superficial back line. The superficial back line would go from the top of the eyes down the back of the neck, come down the alongside the spine, through the buttocks, through the hamstrings, into the calves, and then into the plantar fascia. And very often what happens with people with trigger points is that they would get trigger points along those lines, typical pattern, something like that, and those lines have certainly got parallels with the typical acupuncture lines. There are some interesting little pieces of research coming out. One of them was with treatment for plantar fasciitis, in that it was found that if you get an acupuncture needle or a dry needle into the webbing at the thumb, that you do have an improved rate of healing with plantar fasciitis. That is if the person gets into the right shoes, has their foot arch potentially built up a little bit, maybe goes for some soft tissue release. That certainly getting acupuncture points in on a part of the body that seems to be unrelated to the feet does seem to help. There's also an interesting line that has come up, and I am going to put the attachments so that you can find these articles. I'll put the attachments at the bottom of the video. That there is a portion on vastus lateralis. So this is a right knee. Vastus lateralis would be the muscle, the quadricep muscle that would come on the outside of the leg, that there is a point called stomach 34, which is roughly kind of one kneecap up, and that if you get a dry needle into that specific area, it can have a huge impact on injuries like patellofemoral pain syndrome. And so there do seem to be these overlaps between Western medicine and Eastern medicine, and this certainly is a very, very interesting area of study. So, going back to trigger points, how does one develop a trigger point? Well, a trigger point can develop from muscle overusage. It can also develop when you put a muscle into a stretched position too long. I want to give you an example, a typical 21st century example, someone spending lots of time in front of a computer. Very often the SCM muscles, these muscles here, begin to shorten as the person slants forward. What they'll very, very often do is, as they're working on a keyboard, is they'll begin to roll their shoulders in, shorten the pectoral muscles, and then get into a stoop position. And so what happens is the fascia and the muscles close in on this stoop position, and what you get is along the back is you get all of these muscles here that normally pull the neck up and get you into good posture. Those muscles get put into a constant stretched position, and they develop trigger points, and those trigger points can be quite painful. How do you deal with trigger points? Well, one of the best ways is still getting thumbs in or getting elbows in order to soften the points. We use a lot of dry needling. This is an example of a dry needle, and really dry needling is not painful at all. I'm going to just pull the dry needle out and hope that the camera is good enough to pick the dry needle up. And that really is the exact same needle that would be used by an acupuncturist. The reason why it's called dry is that it has no little tube inside in order to inject some form of medication. So it really is just a single unit. Also, one of the other things that we use a lot of, and I'm a big fan, is that of kinesiology tape. There have been debates whether kinesiology tape works or whether it's just a way of showing off that you've got an injury by wearing some brightly colored tape on your skin. Let me assure you the tape absolutely works, and it's one of these wonderful ways of loosening up fascia. What typically happens is that you have a layer of skin, and then you've got your fascial layer in between, and then muscle. What normally happens is as a muscle moves, it moves the skin with it. The moment you put a bit of kinesiology tape on the skin stiffens slightly, and suddenly as the muscle moves, you end up getting a little bit of a fascial release under that area where the skin is. So I hope that's cleared up for you. Trigger points develop in athletes, they develop in people with bad posture, people who spend lots and lots of time in front of a computer. People with muscle imbalances will often get trigger points, and you can always give us a call, and I'll do the best that I can to try and help you get over those trigger points. Acupuncture, slightly different, and yet there are very, very interesting overlays. And then acupressure, simply acupuncture, but without actually getting a needle into a person, but rather placing pressure on that typical point. I really do hope that that's helped. Won't you give our YouTube page a like so that you can get updates of when we post more, and then remember to look down there. The Facebook details are there, Twitter details are there, as well as 2 articles that will just help you understand that little bit of an overlay between Eastern and Western medicine. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.